of their best numbers. Listeners tend to like one more than the other, and you've got to know which one. You've got to get the right one out of this marvellous morass of cardboard.
One of Peter Clayton's many jobs in broadcasting is to host a Radio 3 programme devoted to playing jazz requests. Every week, listeners write in asking to hear particular jazz recordings they hope are to be found in the BBC's vast record collection. Finding the specific recording means knowing how to use the catalogue. 1.25 million cards, arranged alphabetically and cross-referenced under title, artist and composer. But just how complicated a process is it to find the card you want?
There are three ways. You go to the title or the artist, or you don't get either from your listener, so you have to do some deduction. I've got a letter here from a man who says he would like to hear a duet by Louis Armstrong and Earl Hines. Now, if all you know is that either Earl Hines or Louis Armstrong is on, you go to these artist cards. Now, OK, Louis Armstrong starts there, and they keep going, Armstrong, Armstrong. There's 3.5 inches of solid cardboard there. Earl Hines about half of it. I happen to know that the duet he wants is called Weatherbird. So you go to the title cards, and that narrows it down a great deal and is a lot easier. But there are instances where the only way is to plod through all these cards.
This collection of cards is a database. Of course, it's not on a computer, but you could actually program a computer to do the sort of job that Peter Clayton was doing by shuffling through these cards. Well, we've taken a small section of this database, about 1,000 cards, it's about that many, and put them on this microcomputer. I'm going to do exactly the same work as he was doing by looking through the cards. First of all, I'm going to select the soloist. Soloist and Armstrong, A-R-M-S-T-R-O-N-G. And there we have 117 records with Louis Armstrong. This one is Ain't Misbehaving. And we can go along and look at some of the other ones, Squeeze Me, whatever that is, and I'm Not Rough, and so on and so forth. Now, I want one with Earl Hines on it, so I can select again, soloist, and it's Hines, H-I-N-S. And there we've got 34 records with Earl Hines in it, and he's obviously in Squeeze Me with Louis Armstrong. Now, I know that Weather was in the title, so I select once again, on title, Weather. We don't need to type in the whole title. And there we have it, Weatherbird, one record of 3, and we can look at another record, and we can see here the recording date, Chicago, 5th of December, 1928. Well, you might ask why we'd want to put all this information on a computer in the first place. Well, it's very straightforward. If you wanted to access any of these cards, you actually have to be present here in this room. If the information was stored on a computer, you could access it from anywhere where there's a telephone line. Well, of course, there are 1 million of these cards here, and a little micro like this wouldn't make any dent on that whatsoever. But it can store, this particular system, 65,000 records, which is quite useful for many of the sort of databases you're likely to meet, particularly those in the home. So what do we need to know to use a database? Well, there are 3 fundamental concepts. Well, those 3 concepts have been around ever since computers were invented, and that's the concept of files, records, and fields. And it's relatively easy to understand it when you can actually see them physically. Here in the gramophone library, this file is a file of one manufacturer, and it's a collection of his records. So, exactly the same in computer terminology, a file is a collection of records. Here it's a real record. In computer terminology, a record is a collection of items of information which are held in fields. In this case, one field with the record manufacturer, World Records. Another, the record number, SM424. The title, Hot 5s and 7s Complete. Another field for the performer, Louis Armstrong and Earl Hines. And finally, a field for the track, track 4, Weatherbird. Great music to drive to that. Well, in getting the information out of that database, we used a commercial data management program. Now, the handling of files of information in BASIC can be quite tricky, and the code to do it is different on different machines. So how is it possible to write a program to store information and then get hold of it in any way that I want? Well, I can demonstrate some of the principles by writing a simple program to store a list of people's birthdays. In BASIC, first we've got to decide on how many birthdays and how many names we might want to store.
It's a bit like going to a shop and buying a birthday book. You've obviously got to choose a book that's about the right size for the number of entries you expect to make. Now, each entry here is a record. Here's David, and that's the first field, and the 3rd of November is his birthday. And each one of these is a record, and each contains 2 items of information, or 2 fields, the name and the birthday. Well, to do this on the computer, we use the concept of an array. And it sounds very complex, it's rather a difficult word, but an array is just a set of variables, in other words, stores, all with the same name, but labelled 1 to 10, 1 to 50, or 1 to 200, or whatever, depending on the maximum number of names or birthdays that we want to store. It's a bit like creating a series of boxes. The first one is called name string 1, the second name string 2, the third name string 3, and so on up to 50. Now, let's have a look at this program. We've got to tell the computer to expect a maximum of so many names, and here's the statement that does it. Dim means dimension, and it's telling the computer to expect up to 50 names. And the second line of our program, line 20, again it's dimension, and it tells the computer to expect up to 50 birthdays. Well, the next thing is putting in the information. With the book, I simply find the next blank page or blank part of a page, and then I'll write a record in here with 2 fields, and record in here another name and another birthday. And I do this as many times as I've got names. Well, on the computer, we're going to use a couple of commands, data and read. They're always linked together. And for the moment, we're going to put in just 10 records. That's just 10 names and birthdays to fill up part of an array with them. If some of the array is empty, it really doesn't matter. So the next instruction we have here is line 30 and line 50. So we're going to read those 10 items of data with that for item 1 to 10, next item. And here are the 2 statements, read and data. Read on line 40 and data is listed on line 60. We're going to read for the first time through the loop, read name string 1 and date string 1, and that goes to the data list there, and it will read in David and call it name string 1, and the 3rd of November and call it date string 1. The next time around the loop, it will read name string 2, which will be John, the contents will be John, and date string 2, which will be the 6th of August, and so on and so on. And it'll go around that loop until it's read in the whole of that data and set up the array.